This podcast explores the sensitive and often distressing topic of missing people of color. Listener discretion is advised, as some episodes may contain graphic details and descriptions that could be triggering or upsetting. My intention is to shed light on these cases with respect and compassion, honoring the lives and stories of those affected. I encourage listeners to prioritize their emotional well being while engaging with this content.
You are now listening to The Missing Ones, a true crime podcast dedicated to shedding light on the stories of men, women, and children of color who have gone missing. In a world where media coverage often favors certain narratives, we recognize a painful truth. People of color frequently receive far less attention when they disappear. Our mission is clear: to bring awareness to their stories, to amplify their voices, and to advocate for their safe return. This is The Missing Ones.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of The Missing Ones, a true crime podcast. It's your girl Kay, and I hope that you all are having a amazing Saturday and you're ready to dive into another case to, bring one of ours home to their family, or at the very least, to provide them closure. Tonight's wine of choice is the Apothic Crush Red, which is a nice mulled wine. Now, I'm gonna tell you, you do have to serve this wine heated to really bring out its flavor. I know you sitting back hearing that and you're like, why are you warming up wine? I promise you, you will thank me later, okay? It is very good. It is the type of wine that'll, give you a nice, tasteful flavor, but won't have you slurring your words, okay? And y'all know I be on my wine when I'm doing these episodes versus the infamous ones where I'm on some hard liquor because, but I think you guys will like it. It's Apothic Crush Red. Now, this week's episode is another listener suggestion where we discuss the case of Niqui McCown out of Richmond, Indiana. This case was one of those that was very interesting to me because there were like a lot of moving parts that really had me side eyeing how the police handled things, as well as, some of the people involved, honestly. This is the story of Niqui McCown. Nikki was born Marilyn Renee Nicole McCown, January 6th, 1973, to Harvey and Barbara McCown in Richmond, Indiana, but she went by Nikki. She was the youngest of 10 children. Her father, Harvey, had 3 children before he met her mother. But, they weren't the type to be like, oh, this is my half sister or my half brother. Like, they were brothers and sisters. That's what it was. And I feel that because I have a half sister, but like, I don't call her that. Like, that's just my sister. Like, we ain't sharing a bagel. We ain't half and half in it. That's just my sister. But she had her sisters, Michelle, Terry, Tammy, Tanya, and then she had her brothers, Butch, Punch, Emmett, Robbie, Jimmy, and Tony. Now, sadly, Tony passed away when he was 8 months old. So it's obvious that Nikki is from a very big family that was very loving. And, it didn't matter what was going on. They all loved each other and they were all very close. Her mom and dad were the epitome of black love. I mean, hell, they had to be because her mama popped out 7 kids for that man. Whew. Hold my to the 3 living gods. But I mean, hey, that's love. He said, I'm going to keep on having babies. But I digress. Okay. So Nikki was one of those individuals that likes to help others and, always looking out for the little guy. She couldn't stand to see people getting bullied. And she would, let the bullies know, like, hey, that's not gonna happen while I'm around. And even though she's the baby of her siblings, she was in a lot of ways the protector. Her and her sister Michelle are about like a year and a half apart, but you can tell because they acted like they were twins. Like, and I know firsthand how that is because I've seen it in my own family. Like, not twins, but y'all might as well be. And that's how Michelle and Nikki were. They would dress alike and do everything together. They shared the same room and everything. Naturally, I could believe that because God bless their parents. Good Lord, my uterus hurts just thinking about it. 10 kids? Yikes. But, that's just how they were. Nikki was very much a standout kind of girl, as a child, on top of being boisterous and bold. She was very much a daredevil. Like in her mind, this girl thought she was Spider-Man, honey. This girl stayed climbing on stuff. I was talking to her sister Michelle, and she was telling me about how, Nikki would climb trees and pretty much anything that allowed her legs to move. One time, this girl jumped off the roof. Like, see, that would have my nerves all the way bad. Like, I swear these kids have no sense of danger. And apparently, Nikki was one of them kids. Like, she climbed up on the roof of the house one day using her dad's ladder. And her daddy, he come outside and he's like, "Girl, how the hell you get up there?" And, Nikki just shrugs it off. Like, she's like, "Oh, I just climbed the ladder." And then she jumps down like she's a cat or something with 9 lives. Like, ugh, my nerves. But that's just who she was. She was very vibrant, very outgoing. Her laugh and smile, it could just light up a room. And I know that, you guys have heard that phrase before, oh, their smile could light up a room. But looking at the photos of Nikki and really, seeing her, she just had a presence that demanded attention. Like she really could light up a room. Shockingly, she had been diagnosed with Graves' disease and, she had to take meds for it daily, but she didn't let that deter her. She was still so bright and cheerful and loving. And as she got older, she attended Richmond High School where she ran track and was also a cheerleader. And I can see that because she definitely gives cheerleader vibes. Like I'm talking about gives off. If y'all see the pictures that I'm gonna post in the group, she gives off captain of the squad, all of that. Okay. But it was in high school that she met her little boo thing, Robert Webster. Everybody called him Bobby. Robert D. Webster, aka Bobby, was born June 13th, 1969, to Fred Scott and Yvonne Webster White in Richmond, Indiana. Now, he lived in Wayne County most of his life and also graduated from Richmond High School, obviously, because that's where he met Nikki. But even though he was born to Fred and Yvonne, he was raised by his grandparents, Cordelia and Marcel Webster. His grandfather Marcel owned a restaurant called the Barbecue Heaven, and like at 4 years old, Bobby was helping them run it. Like, so it sounds like he was fairly a good man. And honestly, from looking at the pictures from back in the day, he wasn't that bad of a looker either. So, he meets Nikki, and, despite being in high school, they're all over each other. It's given very much, we go together real bad, as Carisha would say. And y'all know how it is in high school. Like after a week, you're just like, oh my God, I love him. And, he's like, oh my God, this bae, this boo. Y'all know how it goes. And that's how it was. So after graduation, Bobby ended up leaving, just breaking Po Nikki's little heart. Now, when he moved away, eventually he gets married and he has a few kids over time. Now, some of the kids, of course, were born after Nikki, but we'll get into that later. He has 3 kids total. Anthony and Artemis are his sons, and then he has a daughter, Antanya. And meanwhile, Nikki is back in Indiana and she's having fun. She's going out, doing all of that. She was at this club one night when she ended up meeting Steven Johnston. Now, pretty much when she met Steven, they got to know each other, and it was very much, oh, baby, you my man, my man, my man. And he had the same sentiments, that was his woman. She graduates from high school in 1991, and she and Steven are just in full bloom. Not long after that, when they get together, she comes to him and she's like, "Babe, guess what?" And Steven finds out that he is going to be a daddy. In 1992, Nikki gives birth to their beautiful daughter, Peyton, and Nikki and Steven were just blessed. But unfortunately, the love kind of fizzled after a while, and the two decided that they didn't need to be together anymore. Peyton was around maybe 3 years old when this happened, but Nikki didn't let that keep her down. Even though she and Steven had broken up, she was still working hard to take care of her and her daughter. At the time, she was working at Dillard's as a salesperson. She was doing a couple of different jobs, and she had eventually gone on to work at Starbank and a few other places. And then she got the job that put her one step closer to her dream job in law enforcement. She got a job working at the Dayton Correctional Institution in Dayton, Ohio. also basically known as the prison. So it's a state prison for women that was, I guess you could say, mid level security. And, she was doing great there. She had dreams of working with the FBI and all of that. She worked her way up. She was a hostage negotiator for the prison, and she was really making a name for herself while she was there. Like, she was the one to watch. And that's exactly what Tommy Swint was doing. Thomas Lewis Swint, aka Tommy, was born December 7th, 1966, in Chambers County, Alabama, to Sylvester and Bobby Swint. Now, there's not much on him as far as his childhood, and honestly, I don't really want to focus on that because, yeah, y'all will see why in a minute. He did come from a big family as well. Like, I think he had like two brothers and six sisters. Not really going to get into all of their names. But in his adult years, he got married to a woman named Lisa, and together they had a daughter named Jasmine. How the hell this man got a job working at a prison is beyond me, and y'all will understand why I said that shortly. But he had a job working at the security prison along with Nikki. They were both working at the prison and basically, guarding the inmates and everything. But Tommy couldn't help but notice how gorgeous Nikki was. And I mean, it's understandable because the girl is gorgeous, okay? But he would always manage to take it too far. Like, he was always telling her, like, "Oh, baby girl, you freaking beautiful. Why don't you just give me a chance?" But Nikki wasn't even thinking about Tommy. Why? Because she had actually spun the block with an old flame, Bobby Webster. They were Nelly and Ashanti before Nelly and Ashanti. Okay. She and Bobby reconnected, and it was on from there. Like, they were back like they never fell off. So Tommy, he really didn't even stand a chance. And even if she wasn't with Bobby, I'm pretty sure she would not have given him the time of day. But Bobby actually decided, you know what? I want to spend the rest of my life with this woman. And he proposed. He goes to Nikki and he tells her, "Baby, I love you. I want to be with you for the rest of my life. Let's get married." And Nikki was just so excited, like, she was all for it. So, the 2 of them, become engaged, and they set a wedding date for August 18th, 2001. Nikki's excited about planning her wedding, and so is her family. But, everything wasn't peaches and cream with Bobby and Nikki all the time. Like, they fought like most couples. At times, though, Bobby would kinda tend to get a little physical. And, Nikki was just like, "You know what? I got this. I can handle it." And that became her motto for a lot of things. It was just like, "I can handle it." She wasn't backing down from anybody because remember, she's always standing up, for the little guy. Bobby was very apologetic when it happened. And, Nikki loved him. So she forgave him for the drama. They were right back on track. But she still had to worry about this fool at her job. Tommy was relentless in trying to get her attention and her affection, even though he had an entire ass wife. But Nikki wasn't no fool. She let him know, like, "I'm not interested in you like that." And Tommy claimed that he understood, but his actions proved otherwise. He was always trying to push up on Nikki. No matter who was around, he wanted her. Still, she only had eyes for one person, and that was her man. Now, there were a few instances where Tommy got out of pocket, for lack of better words. Like, Nikki was used to standing up to bullies, and Tommy definitely was that. But Tommy just wouldn't take the hint. On one occasion, Nikki had come outside to her car and her tires had been slashed. And, of course, she couldn't prove it, but she knew it was Tommy because he was on his same old BS. When Nikki had her bridal shower, do y'all know that this man had lingerie sent as a gift for her? Like, what kind of sick stuff is that? Everybody's giving gifts and, excited for the big day and they all having fun. And this man sends lingerie. Like, not to mention him popping up on her all the time. Like, bro, you're not my dude. What is wrong with you? But regardless, Nikki was doing everything she could to focus on her upcoming nuptials to Bobby. Sadly, Nikki never got to walk down the aisle. It's July 22nd, 2001, and Bobby and Nikki are getting stuff together for the wedding. Bobby and his boy had to go try on some tuxedos. So Nikki tells him, "Hey, babe, I'm going to drop y'all off and then I'll be back later on so, we can do the invitations for the wedding." After she drops them off, Nikki decided to go to the laundromat to do some laundry. Now, she had to get some money to, wash clothes. So she goes to the village pantry, which was this convenience store close by the laundromat, so that she could, get change. She gets what she needs and she goes to the laundromat. And when she gets there, there's these guys in there, and they're making little comments here and there about her. And at first, she's trying to ignore it because it's like, all right, this is childish. They're just being dumb. Now, maybe her clothes were in the wash at this point and she was just waiting, but for whatever reason, Nikki left the laundromat and she goes to her mom's house. And when she gets to her mom's house, Barbara notices that Nikki's like acting kind of weird. Like she's pacing the floor back and forth, and she's just like, he won't leave me alone. He won't leave me alone. And Barbara's looking at her child like, girl, what are you talking about? But Nikki, she's pacing back and forth. And Barbara asks her again, Nikki, what's going on? And then Nikki tells her about the guys that are at the laundromat. And at first, Barbara doesn't really think anything of it because Nikki's a beautiful girl. She gets attention a lot. She a baddie. It's going to happen. So she tells her daughter, well, baby, they probably just, were looking at you. That's all. No big deal, right? So Nikki leaves to go back to the laundromat, and Barbara thinks everything is good. Meanwhile, Michelle is going over to her sister Tammy's house because, she got to get her hair laid. So when she gets there, they're talking and everything. And Tammy's like, hey, have you talked to Nikki? And Michelle's like, mm. Now, ironically, Bobby calls Michelle and he's like, hey, have you talked to Nikki? Like, have you talked to your sister? We're supposed to be doing the invitations for the wedding, but she's not answering her phone. And back then in 2001, folks had cell phones or whatever, but they didn't have the, technological advancements like they do now. Like you couldn't share your location and do all of that. Like God knows it would have been a good idea, but unfortunately, they just didn't have it. So Michelle is talking to Bobby and she tells him, no, I haven't talked to her. So she calls her mother, Barbara, and she's like, hey, have you heard from Nikki? And Barbara tells her how Nikki had been at the house not too long ago. So now everybody's looking for Nikki, but she's nowhere to be found. Bobby's at home. How he got home, I don't know. Now I'm assuming he took a cab or maybe, a friend picked him up, but he's at home and Michelle and the family end up going to the house. And they're talking to him and he happens to be watching a very peculiar movie. Now, this movie is about a woman that comes up missing and they find her car in a very odd place. So he's watching this movie, just sitting back. And, of course, it kind of looks a little suspect. But now the family is saying, like, hey, okay, where's Nikki? We still haven't heard from her. It's been hours. And he explains to them how, the last time he saw her was when she was dropping him off and had taken his truck. And Bobby seems kind of edgy and he's just like, I don't know where she's at. I don't know where she is. I don't know what's going on. Time is going by. It's getting later and later and later and still there's no Nikki. So, Nikki's father Harvey, he's telling everybody, you know what? We need to just go ahead and file a missing persons report. But Bobby doesn't want to do that. And Nikki's father is like, look here, boy, if you don't file one, I'm going to file one. So 911 is called and the police come out and they're telling her family, listen, she's probably just busy doing something or running late or something. Y'all said y'all were getting married. We got to look at all the angles. Maybe she just decided that wasn't what she wanted to do. And I'm starting to feel like it's standard practice for the cops to think the worst first and basically waste time. But the family wasn't trying to hear that. They were like, no, Nikki was excited about getting married. You know, this ain't her regular behavior to just disappear. So they filed a missing persons report and they start calling around and everything, and things are starting to be found out. And at first, to the family, it doesn't seem like the cops were taking anything serious because it took them like 10 days just to really get going. Like, not a day or two, like 10. It took them 10 days to really get the lead out their ass, for lack of better words. And her family wasn't having it. They was on the PD's ass. The cops had no choice but to finally decide, okay, hey, you know what? We got to take this serious. They see what kind of woman Nikki is. She's not just some, random chick off the street. This is a smart and an educated woman. She's hardworking, no record, got a good job. Like she's a stand-up woman. So they're like, okay, we need to get this together. So Detective Wright gets involved and they start doing their investigation. Now, Detective Mike Wright is with the Richmond Police Department and they go over to the village pantry where Nikki had gone to get, the change, and they see that she was last seen around 3:19 p.m. So they go to her apartment, but they don't really see anything out of place. However, they do kind of eyeball Bobby for a little bit. Not because they think he did it, but because he's her fiance. And typically, when you have a situation where there's any type of domestic violence or something like that, they're going to look at the spouse or the boyfriend or whatever. And in this case, it's Bobby. So they do, however, get word that he's been physical with Nikki in the past. So on July 25th, they go ahead and bring him into the Richmond Police Department for an interview. And he's talking to him and he's telling him, listen, last time I saw Nikki, she had dropped me off at the shop to get my tuxedo. I went to my grandmama's house afterwards, and then I went home. And, they're kind of chill at first because they think, like, okay, yeah, everything's cool. He's talking about how excited he is for the wedding and everything. Like, that was his focus. But they find out that after the missing persons report was filed, Bobby was moving a little funny. Whether it was intentional or not, he was moving a little funny. Like the fact that he tried to sell the engagement ring, but the shop wouldn't let that happen because the ring had been purchased by Nikki, not by him. Then he was asking about her student loan money, and he had even canceled the wedding. Not postponed it, but he canceled it altogether. And I mean, at the very least, postpone it and just let everybody know, hey, we got to wait till she comes back. But no, he didn't do that. So, with all of this, it does have officers' interest peaked a little bit. So they ask him, well, Mr. Webster, are you willing to take a polygraph test? And he was like, all right, cool, whatever. And so they start asking him questions about Nikki. And one of the questions that they asked was, did you have anything to do with Nikki disappearing? And of course, he said no. Now, according to Richmond Police Department, they said that when they asked that question and he said no, the needle damn near jumped off the whole desk. And Bobby was very clear. Like, he told her family, listen, I know y'all think I had something to do with it, but I ain't have nothing to do with it. I loved your sister. I wanted to marry her. And at one point, the police considered him a person of interest, but of course, over time, it kind of faded. Then in November of 2001, they find the car that Nikki had been driving. And it was actually Bobby's car, which was this black GMC Jimmy. So they find the car, but it had been stripped of several of its parts, like the battery and everything else you could think of. And I mean, the car had been sitting for like 4 months. So yeah, it was going to get stripped. But the strange thing was, in the car was Nikki's laundry that she had taken to the laundromat, and it was folded neatly, like it hadn't been touched, nothing. No evidence whatsoever. So the cops are like, "Okay, this is odd." And her family is getting hopeful because they're looking at it like, "Well, if her car is found, then that means she's got to be close. She's going to be found." But sadly, nothing came up after that. Now, what was interesting, however, is where the car was found. It was found in Dayton, Ohio, which was like a whole hour away from Richmond. And where the car was found in Dayton was near her baby daddy, Stephen Johnston's house. He lived in an apartment complex near there with his new boo. And the day that she disappeared, Peyton was with her grandmother. So it's not like, Peyton would have been there with her dad, which, of course, would have gave Nikki a reason to go there. So the attention briefly shifts to Steven, and the Richmond police bring him in for an interview. Now, see, Steven and Nikki's relationship was kind of rocky too. Like, Steven was very abusive towards Nikki, according to the investigative reports and according to her sister Michelle. So the police do an interview, but it's not until a few years later in like 2018. Nonetheless, the interview was done, and Steven admitted that he wasn't necessarily the best boyfriend. Like, he told the cops, I cheated on her. I was abusive to her. I didn't do right by her. And a lot of people were not really suspecting him as much. So, they're still looking at the current spouse because they're looking at it like, all right, this is typically how it goes with domestic situations. It's nine times out of 10 going to be the spouse. And I mean, he was pretty much, cooperative from jump, but They still kept an eye on him. And then the police get a new tip that has them looking at a whole new person of interest, Tommy Swint. Now, at this point, the police have conducted so many interviews. Like they had done over 30 interviews of different family and friends and coworkers and everything. But with this newfound information that they have, they know, like, you know what? We need to go back and interview a couple of more people. Nikki's sister, Michelle, had told the police about how one day she went to Nikki's house, and when she walked in, Nikki had her foot in Tommy's chest. And Nikki's like crying out, like, "Oh my God, help me. He's trying to rape me." But then Tommy plays it off and he just jumps up and he starts running around the house, chasing both of them at this point. And he's laughing about it, which is the craziest shit to me. But he's laughing about it. And Michelle's just looking like, okay, what's really going on? And she's looking at Nikki, but Nikki's like, don't worry about it. And like I said, Nikki's the type of person where, she doesn't want to get anybody involved in drama. So Michelle is kind of leery about him because from day one, since she's heard of him, he's giving off creep vibes. So the police bring him in for an interview and they're asking him questions and they keeping it real with him. Like, Tommy, we getting statements that you're somebody that we need to be looking into. And then they start looking into his record and they're like, okay, you worked with Nikki, and it appears that you know that you've got a lot of complaints against you. You've been sexually harassing women and all kinds of stuff. What's going on with that? Oof. If only they knew what he had tried to do with Nikki chasing her and her sister. That would have really had them eyeballing him. Like, I kind of wish that she had, said something, but Nikki being Nikki, she wanted to handle it herself. But, Tommy is real nonchalant about it. He was just like, listen, of course they gonna have something to say about me. They bitter and, blah, blah, blah. But, basically kind of demoralizing women and putting the blame on them. But on top of that, he didn't really have an alibi, at least not one that was concrete. So, the cops, they're eyeballing him, but they can't do anything. So they have to let him go. They can't arrest him. So they let him go. But they still had him listed as a person of interest. So time continues to just drag on and still no word of Nikki's whereabouts, no clue. Not so much as a phone call. And sadly, Nikki's father gets sick and he passes away in 2004, just 3 years after she disappeared. Peyton's getting older. And, as time goes on, she actually ends up getting married and having her own child, believe it or not. Like, she's got a daughter now. And, she's longing for the day that she can see her mother again. And so that her mother can, know that she's a grandma and that she can meet her granddaughter. Now, here's some interesting stuff that I found. So, Tommy was a person of interest. And although he was never arrested, he was on the suspect list for something else. Prior to Nikki disappearing, Tommy had shown his true nature, so to speak, and it was found out that in 1991, Mr. Thomas Swint, who thinks he's the ladies' man, had committed murder. See, at the time that all of this was found out, Tommy had relocated to Phoenix City, Alabama with his wife and his daughter. And he had started working for the Trotwood Police Department. But what he failed to disclose is that he was a person of interest in Nikki's disappearance. Like, Homeboy had been with the police department all but 2 months when they found out that he was still a person of interest. So they fired him. Like, duh, you can't be a cop and be under suspicion for something like that. Anyway. So the police department ended up firing him and he takes on a new job doing security. But an unsolved murder that was like 18 years ago comes back on him through the help of technological advancement and DNA evidence. Remember, I told y'all earlier there was some craziness with this man? This is it. Tommy was linked to the murder of Tina Marie Ivory. She had disappeared December 14th, 1991. Now, supposedly, Tina was a prostitute. And like I said, her family and friends had last seen her December 14th. After that, she just kind of went missing. This tree trimming crew discovered her partially nude body on December 17th, 1991, in a pile of trash on Dayton Liberty Road near Calumet Lane. She had been beaten, strangled, and just dumped in a brush pile, according to the authorities. Her body had been wrapped in two semi transparent trash bags and then wrapped in a red, white, and blue quilt. Now, until the indictment, no one had been charged in her death. But once they linked it back to Tommy, they were on it. On February 3rd, 2010, the cops was like, all right, boys, let's go get him. They get ready to close in on his house. Y'all, when I say they literally were walking down the walkway to this man's door, when all of a sudden, pop, they hear a single gunshot. This man knew that they were coming for him. Like, he knew that he had an indictment over his head. So what does he do? Shoots himself in the head. Rather than face his judgment, he took the easy way out and killed himself. Now, a lot of people, tend to believe that he's the one that's responsible for Nikki's death. I'm not one that can, make that speculation because I can only go based off of the articles that I found and, in speaking with the family and whatnot. There's a lot of different websites that I visited that showed different theories as to what people felt. I'm going to read one of those to you in a few. But after Tommy killed himself, sadly, on March 14th, 2021, Bobby also passes away. And he passes away from what people think was a heart attack. Now, at this point, like I said, he had, gone on to live his life and he had, other children and everything. But a lot of people think Bobby is innocent. Just because you fail a lie detector test doesn't really mean anything. Like, a lot of times people will take the lie detector test and it's not even admissible in a court of law. Like, it's just something that's done to basically see if you're willing to do it and to kind of, shake you up, in my opinion. But, at the end of the day, again, can't really speculate and say, oh, he for sure had something to do with it just because he didn't pass the lie detector test. Because at the end of the day, if I take a polygraph right now, there may be some things I might not pass depending on, what's asked. Okay. And it's not because I'm lying, but it's people's emotions be on high and they're all edgy and stuff. And not everybody can handle anxiety well. And those things go off of stuff like that. Like, I don't care what nobody say. Okay. They go off of a lot of stuff. But it's really sad and tragic that he never got to marry the love of his life. He never got to see her walk down that aisle and see her in that beautiful white dress. But he did, have a bit of her memory with him, even though Peyton wasn't his biologically, they still kept in touch. They still communicated with each other. Nikki's story was on Dateline and Peyton was on the episode and she told them that, that she believed that Bobby was always innocent and how they were really close. She told them, listen, we talked about it a few times and he explained why he did things the way he did. You're just kind of doing everything you can to find out what happened. When they interviewed Steven to ask him, his thoughts on it and his possible involvement, it broke him. Like, he told them that he blames himself. And over the years, talking with Peyton, she knows that it's a very sensitive subject for him because to him, he's like, damn, if I would have been better to her in our relationship, if I would have treated her better, she would have never been in that position. She never would have been with Bobby. She never would have been at that laundromat. And you can play shoulda, woulda, couldas, but things play out how they play out. When Dateline asked Peyton about Tommy, she was like, I'm not sure if he has anything to do with her disappearance. I'm very much innocent until proven guilty. I know all signs point to Tommy, but he's also got a daughter of his own. I also believe that someone out there knows something. I don't believe Tommy was able to keep all those secrets to himself. And then Michelle, Nikki's sister, had the same sentiment. She said, listen, we may never know if he had anything to do with my sister's disappearance. We may never know where she's at or if he did anything to her. I'm hoping that with the new technology or something, people just don't disappear. Somebody knows something. Now, it's only been a few years since Detective Wright took on the case. They've done multiple searches of areas in Richmond, Indiana. They've searched wooded areas, just kind of hoping that they can find some type of evidence to help. One thing that they do have is Tommy's old computer. Granted, that thing is older than Jesus, and they not sure if they can, even get to some files on there. Like, that thing is over 15 years old. But it's something. It's better than just the unknown. Like, there's no body, there's no evidence. All they can do is follow up on leads and hope that at some point somebody comes forward. Barbara, the kid's mother, she died July 21st, 2020 of cancer. And It was literally one day before Nikki's anniversary of her disappearance. Like, Peyton felt like she lost her mom all over again because after her mom disappeared, she moved in with her grandmother. And now her grandmother's gone. But Peyton has vowed to lead the charge now. Like she says, Grandma didn't stop. Grandma fought hard for a very long time. We haven't stopped looking for her, and we will continue to look for her. We all love her and loved her and just want her back to us. And as for Nikki's sister Michelle, she's also very committed to finding her sister. She's looking at it like, okay, you got Lacey Petersons and all of that out here getting national attention, but you don't hear a peep about, my sister. And she told Dateline, she was on the episode as well. She said, my sister wasn't getting that national attention that I felt she deserved. So Michelle started working with the Doc Ellis Foundation. It's a nonprofit organization which is focused on helping finding missing men and women and children of color. She works as the foundation's director and outreach coordinator now, and she uses it as a way of healing, which is great. Her thoughts were, when we bring one home, it's so rewarding. But when we bring one home deceased, it's still a bit of, at least they don't have to live with the not knowing. And I can relate because that's what I'm trying to do with this podcast, to bring the missing people of color home, or at the very least, to give them that closure if it's not a positive or, happy ending. As of today, Nikki is still missing and her case is still active. She is 5'3" and weighs 115 pounds. She was last seen wearing a dark colored swimsuit top, biker shorts, and sandals. She would be 52 years old today. If anyone has any information pertaining to Nikki's whereabouts or the case, please contact the Richmond Police Department at 765-983-7247. Any and all information is helpful, even the slightest bit. And now it is time for Make It Make Sense, which is focused on the facts in the case and areas that may seem a little gray and, well, my thoughts and, if you agree to it. Now, with this one, I really don't want to speculate too much because, this whole Tommy Swint thing, it really took me for a loop. I'm not gonna lie. It's just it really has me bugged, okay? Like it's a lot of things that have me feeling a certain type of way. Like this man has sexually harassed so many women and God knows what else. And it's automatically got me thinking, like, okay, I bet he was probably doing this to the inmates too, because you were working at a female prison. Like, it's really making me think like, okay, I'm side-eyeing slightly and wishing that the investigators would have leaned a little bit more into it. Then he kills a quote unquote so-called prostitute, and was able to get away with it for quite a while before he was caught, which of course has me thinking like, all right. So was that the only one that he got away with? Did he actually get away with, anything involving Nikki? Could he have possibly been involved? There's so many unanswered questions, and unfortunately, we can't get those questions answered because he killed himself. You know, it has me thinking, okay, there may be more to this or more to him than meets the eye. But again, he's now dead, so good riddance to bad trash. Because at the end of the day, he's still an asshole that kills somebody, and at the very least, Tina Ivory's family has closure, even though it took 18 years. But I think now in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, was he responsible? Could he have done more than what we know? Did he finally take it too far when it came to Nikki? Now, when it comes to Bobby, honestly, I don't get those vibes just, from the things that I've read. I mean, I could be wrong. At the end of the day, nobody knows what happened except Nikki and the person that did it. One thing, though, that really irks me is the fact that the police kind of disregarded yet another person of color and just treated it like, oh, she just wandered off. Like, how do you wait 10 days before you decide to do your job? Like, you have her entire family telling you, hey, this is not how she is. This is not who she is. She doesn't do stuff like this. She works hard. But yet you dismiss her like it's nothing. Like, make that make sense. If you would have acted quickly, things could have been different. I don't know if they couldn't do surveillance back then. I don't know if it was a situation where they just had to sit and wait to see if, anybody would do anything. But my question is, Bobby took a polygraph. Did Tommy? Because Bobby failed his polygraph, I'm pretty sure Tommy would have flunked that with a straight F. Okay. As time went on and technology became more advanced, did you guys rerun DNA? Did you go back and look at the truck again? There's a lot of different things that I feel like they kind of dropped the ball on. Maybe go back and pull surveillance footage from where her car or from where the truck was found. Because if parts were missing, that means somebody had access to that truck and took it. So go back and look at the footage. Those are the kind of things that are playing in my head. There's a lot of different things that I feel like they could, they could have done differently, especially now that we have the advancement in technology that we do. I'm really hoping that they say, okay, hey, you know what? We need to do better. We need to look at this from start to finish and go over everything with a fine tooth comb. Now, if you recall, I told you earlier that there were people that had things to say pertaining to the disappearance of Nikki. I was actually on the Unsolved Mysteries page reading up on the case when I was doing my research, and some of the comments really caught my attention. There was one in particular from a girl named Carissa that posted on June 7th of this year. Now, it's a little lengthy, but listen to this. This is what she had to say. I am what you can call amateur detective without a badge. I think it was Tommy Swint. She goes to the laundromat, has some trouble with two strangers, leaves, go to her mom's, complains about it, and I think she went back and finished. Her laundry was folded nice in the car, so that means there was not a struggle or it would have been messed up or wrinkled, especially 3 months later. The laundry owner stated there was no problems that day and being abducted in daylight is a high risk. Nikki would have screamed or fought back. There would have been a struggle. She was last seen on video footage at a convenience store, nothing out of the ordinary, got change and left. The ex boyfriend has a solid alibi and passed a lie detector test. The fiance, I believe, did not do it. They state he lied on the lie detector test, but he's very emotional. His fiance is missing. He has bills to pay, a search party to attend in searching for the person he loved, and where would he have stored the car for 3 months? Yes, it's mostly always the husband's wife, but there are times where it's the jealous ex or obsessed friend that wants to be more, which brings me to Tommy. Tommy Swint is a known murderer, never convicted but charged with the Ivory's case. DNA was involved. Nikki's niece stated that she went over to her house one day on lunch break and heard yelling and Nikki saying he was trying to rape her. Tommy sent her lingerie to her bridal shower. He harassed other females at his job at the Montgomery County Education and Pre Release Center where him and Nikki worked. He wanted to be more than friends with Nikki, and I think family and friends had noticed that. The day after Nikki was reported missing, he called off work. It was said he went to church with his wife, home, took a nap, and woke up for dinner. I believe he lured Nikki to meet him or pick him up to buy hair products for her wedding. Her sister said she wanted her hair and everything to be perfect, that she would have had to travel to get it. I think she went. The investigator had stated when they checked the vehicle, the driver's seat had not been moved, only she could have driven it. I believe she drove to Dayton, met with Tommy, waited for him, and he got in the passenger side. I think he acted as if everything was okay, and down the road forced her to drive somewhere, and her being scared, I think she cooperated. And when they got there, I believe the struggle happened outside the vehicle. When you die, you release fluids. I think he waited a while, put her in the vehicle. There was towels on the passenger floorboards, and air freshener on the rearview mirror. I believe he moved her body somewhere along with whatever belongings she had, like purse and car keys. I think he dumped her somewhere, did not realize he forgot to take the keys, and hotwired the car to drive it to a car wash, the older styler ones where everything was manual. I think he went to one of the older ones in Dayton, vacuumed, washed down, wiped down, and dried anything in or outside the car. I think he detailed it before leaving it at her ex boyfriend's apartment complex. I believe that's where the air freshener came from. The clothes were not messed up. I think the towels were his or he purchased elsewhere. If he did detail the car, he would have had to at least move the baskets of clothes, maybe check the baskets for fingerprints, depending on the material of them. The air freshener probably from a vending machine like they had at the older car washes. There used to be one like that in Riverside, Ohio, and Dayton. After he got done with the car, dropped it off, and either drove the car in the same seat position Nikki had set to or put it back in the general position, tore out the stereo, took the battery to make it look like a carjacking or robbery, and tried to set the ex boyfriend up, but never realized he would have an alibi for the day and night Nikki went missing. He wanted to be with Nikki in a way that was not friends. He did pass a lie detector test, but he was also a corrections officer and Trotwood police officer and was a Marine, so also has military knowledge and training. He knew what was looked for, and I believe he knew how to pass it even if he was lying. He knew how to avoid certain questions when interviewed. Even if he never met the ex boyfriend, he still had access to find his address. His motive: if I can't have you, your fiance can't either. I have really been researching this case. I am currently going to school for forensic investigations and photography. There are some other things I could mention, but I don't want to write too much that you won't read it. But I think Nikki is somewhere in Dayton, even though Tommy Swint passed away from suicide in 2008. Woof. Baby, that was very detailed, okay? She gave some details that nobody knew. Like, wow, you know, and it definitely gives you a reason to pause and just be like, "Okay, you know what? Might have to look into some of that." Now, some of that was a bit of a stretch. I'm just looking like, "Okay, I'm not gonna comment on that." But there was a lot of stuff in there that really has me saying, "Okay, all right, Carissa." Now, Peyton was also in the comments, which is Nikki's daughter. She was in the comments because some of the people were just saying whatever, which was truly disturbing. Some people were creating some, crazy conspiracy theories, and Peyton was there to shut it down. Like, people, please remember it's okay to have a thought or an opinion, but don't let it get too crazy to where you lose focus of what it's all about. And that's the victim and bringing them home. I'd like to thank Michelle McCown Luster for speaking with me and being very open about her sister and, you know, really reliving that because I know that was difficult for her. So thank you, Michelle, for that. Again, if anyone has any information pertaining to Nikki's whereabouts or the case, please contact the Richmond Police Department at 765-983-7247. Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Missing Ones, where we shine a light on the stories of missing people of color. If you found value in today's case, please consider sharing this episode with others and leaving a review. Links and information will be posted in the Infamous Ones discussion group on Facebook. Together, we can raise awareness and advocate for justice. Until next time, guys, take care and continue to seek truth and compassion in every story.
Thank you for listening to The Missing Ones, a true crime podcast. If you have any information regarding any of the cases covered, please reach out to local authorities or the organizations dedicated to finding them. Join us next week as we explore more stories, more voices, and keep the hope alive for those still missing. Until then, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, their story matters.